Hey, everybody. Mark and I have over 20 years of experience as therapists and as addicts in long-term successful recovery. We know better than anyone what works and what doesn't to break out of porn and sex addiction, heal betrayal trauma, and reclaim your relationship.
And we've poured all of our personal and professional recovery and healing experience into a first-of-its-kind program for addicts, spouses, and couples. We call it Dare to Connect.
At least 4 times every week, we engage with you in real time, in the trenches, giving you the knowledge and the tools to take back your life and relationship.
Whatever else you've done on your journey for healing and recovery, you've never done anything like this.
Mark and I, we've made all the mistakes, so you don't have to. Don't reinvent the wheel.
We all know tomorrow never comes. Look, don't wait one more day to change. Claim your free 2-week trial today at daretoconnectnow.com.
Hey everybody, I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSE Squared podcast.
Hey everyone, all you PBSE listeners, this is Mark and Steve. We are coming to you with episode 232. 232. I like that's got a nice sound to it.
Rolls off the tongue.
232. And you'll notice the title, the PBSE Dare to Connect approach versus 12-step support groups.
Dun, dun, dun.
And we've had, we get a fair number of questions about this, even over the years. And so I'm gonna go ahead and read the submission that was sent to us by a partner who's in Betrayal Trauma Healing. And here's what she asks, the question she sent in to Steve and I. So, is it me, or are the approaches of partner-oriented 12-step fellowships the opposite of the recovery approach taken in PBSE podcasts? The podcasts are all about connection and boundaries. The partners' 12-step fellowship meetings I attend feel all about ignoring your partner's actions and not letting his actions hurt you, and then doing what makes you happy. So it's all about disconnection, right? Why is it that the 12-step groups, are popular on both Reddit and your podcasts? Am I seeing this wrong, or is there something about those 12-step fellowships that I don't understand?
Yeah, I remember when we got, we have a bit of a backlog on the podcast, so I remember when this came in, because we generally speaking do them in chronological order. And I remember first thinking when this one came in, this is going to be a zinger. I can't wait till it comes up because
Yeah.
it is a good topic. And yeah, like Mark said, on occasion this sort of thing will be sent in to us. And Mark and I are both very familiar with 12-step. I myself, I've been attending a 12-step fellowship for off and on, for the most part, for over 15 years now, which is shocking. And for sex addiction specifically, I've been sober for nearly just under 10 years, but continue to affiliate myself that way. And I could definitely see how on the surface, if you were to look at certain things that we do say in the podcast in PBSE or in our Dare to Connect program for addict spouses and couples, because we take the same much more in depth version, but it's the same approach on that program as well. And you were to compare it to some of what's talked about in 12-step, especially for partners, right? Letting go of, what you can't change, etc. It would be easy to see how on maybe the surface, how some of these might be a little bit opposite. But today, we did want to get into how actually, as a couple of guys who are very familiar with 12-step, love 12-step, and actually, in fact, 12-step is so important to us. Many of you probably know this, but in the Dare to Connect program that we have 3 groups during the week, one for addicts, one for spouses, one for couples. They're all 60 minutes long. And then about a year and a half ago or something like that, we added We expanded the program as one of many expansions we've done since then, and we added weekend 12-step groups that are led by Mark and myself, and or a female partner in long-term recovery that we've hired. Her name is Jenna Lee. We run those groups personally on the weekend each Sunday. And so we are such fans of 12-step that we've incorporated an approach into our program. We use 12-step literature that we got approval from the fellowship that we target to do that for both addicts and for partners. And so yeah, we're heavily into the 12-step piece. And the reason why is because when you start to go deeper with what we talk about on PBSE, we could call that, I guess, a connection oriented approach. And you start to look at how 12-step is designed to function, especially in the long term. Not just in the short term for partners at the initial beginning, but in the long term, you start to see that these two approaches, I guess you could look at them as kind of two different approaches. It's like a two-pronged attack to the recovery process, right? There's, on the surface, they may look like they're coming from very different angles. And I guess in some ways they are, but they lead to the same place. And we're going to talk about that today and how that works. So yeah, it's gonna be good today. I'm excited to jump into this.
Well, and I think the other thing, Steve, is because 12-step groups, they're nonprofit, right? They're not led by professional therapists. They're just led by people, who have more water under the bridge with regard to their recovery or healing. And all 12-step groups are not created equal. I mean, it depends on personalities involved. It depends on where they are in the steps. It depends on, some people are very passionate about certain approaches or topics in 12-step. And so you get a much heavier emphasis on those. And that's what really occurred to me as I read her submission. I can easily see where you'll get, 12-step groups that are for partners in healing, where maybe you'll have a lot of partners in that group where they have been far too enmeshed with their addict partners, and the 12-step group is trying to help them to become, independent, sovereign individuals who are truly owning their side of the street, doing their own healing, learning what they can control and can't control, right? And letting the addict own his side. And you can see if there was a really passionate, really energetic focus on that. And if that's where they happen to be in the steps, and if maybe that's where the passion of that group happens to be at that time, I can easily see where you could get this message. Hey, it's all about me. He could do whatever he's going to do over there, and I'm just going to go be happy.
Yeah.
You can easily see how that could happen.
I could. And I actually like where you're going with that too, because one of the inherent dangers with a 12-step, and by the way, again, we couldn't be more 12-step, I don't know what you'd call it, endorsing. I mean, we love 12. It's life-changing, but there are some, it just like Mark said, because of the nature of it, when you have a group that's not professionally facilitated and it's, being run by somebody who has been in the group for a while, it's sometimes easy for those groups to, and this isn't common, but on occasion maybe devolve a little bit. Like, for example, we've heard horror stories over the years where partner groups on occasion have, without anyone even realizing it, they've become very oriented towards skepticism regarding the addict. So rather than there being, a healthy focus on, hey, here's the problem, but let's focus on the solution, which is what 12-step is designed to do, generally speaking. Sometimes it can almost become kind of a who's got the worst husband in the room discussion without even anyone realizing that. And so
Sometimes.
It's one of the reasons was why we actually added 12-step support groups to our program, to ensure that there's a resource for our subscribers who aren't going to run into that kind of thing. So,
well, and just trying to be empathetic with partners, you can understand how groups like that could go into that focus, because you have,
of course,
partners of addicts who haven't been heard, haven't had a voice, haven't been able to speak their truth or stand their ground or any of those things. And now you're in a group where, wow, I'm with.
It's finally safe.
Yeah, I finally get to speak my mind, and you can see how that can become a big focus, and it is important that it is part of the focus. But if you're not careful, you never really get into the place of empowerment, which is the solutions approach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. So yeah, so we're hoping to cover a little bit of that today, and this will be, like I said, a good discussion, not for those who have a question similar to this, but it also helps to understand how maybe these two worlds work, right? Because these worlds of, again, on the surface, connection and the touchy feely side of recovery and the rigid holding boundary side, they both have a place at the table. One doesn't override the other. They actually, they're just different tools in a toolbox. So hopefully that's what everybody can kind of walk away with today.
Yeah.
So to kind of approach this, probably the best way to do this as we were getting ready for today was just to kind of break down her question into a couple of key phrases and then address those, because it's probably the easiest way to go about this. When we talk about boundaries, for example, so right now in Dare to Connect, we've mentioned the last couple of weeks, boundaries is one of the big topics in Dare to Connect. We rotate topics frequently all the time, and a lot of them don't come around again for some time. But boundaries and the discussion and the dialogue and the skill sets related to them, we probably cycle in it's at least every 6 months, if not more, because we always have new people coming in the program, and they're so critical and important for review. And when you talk about boundaries, the reality is boundaries are one of those topics, I think, in the therapy community. The more I do this work 15 years in, and Mark, you and I have talked about this, it's kind of a buzzword, I think, in recovery circles. It's like, well, you got, boundaries. That's your answer. You got to have better boundaries. But there's a shocking amount of, I think, even professionals out there who don't really understand fully how boundaries are really designed to work, especially in a recovery situation. And when it comes to breaking out of codependency, establishing healthy relationship dialogues, and all the things that have to happen as part of the recovery from betrayal process.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
so
true.
so I think a lot of that, so again, it's one of those topics that are kind of often discussed, but rarely understood. Boundaries, when we set up, so rule number one that we talk about in PBSE and in, again, our Dare to Connect program, is that boundaries are never, ever set up, if they're set up healthily, to change another person. Ever.
Yeah, not to change another person, not to try to control what
Correct.
they're doing or not doing, not to try to to have a total ability to manage outcomes or results, and everything I just said. Those are all very natural, normal ways for a partner in betrayal trauma healing to come at it, right? Because they've been so out of control.
Yes.
They've had so little say so. And often because they have disclosure day, D day as we call it, now they're discovering that the relationship is not what they thought it was, right? There's been gaslighting, there's been facades and masks and pretenses and all these behaviors going on behind the scenes. So the natural reaction to that, which is really part of the brain's survival system, is to say, okay, I'm not going to be blindsided by any of that anymore. So I'm going to step into a place of total control.
Yep.
I'm going to manage and oversee and be hyper vigilant about every aspect of this to make sure that I protect myself going forward.
Absolutely.
And that's what you see commonly happen. And often when boundaries are talked about, it's part of that discussion. Well, you need to slap a boundary on him so that you make him do X, Y, or Z, or so that ABC never happens again. That's why you set boundaries.
And that right there is the recipe for problems, right?
Yes.
That's where it goes off the rails, because what we learned with the very first thing that, and this is one of the reasons, there's been a lot of research about 12-step groups, and they are clinically proven to work for a number of conditions. And I think one of the key reasons, as I look back on my time in 12-step, something that I took from the 12-step approach right out the gate is there's a very clear division of labor, I guess you could call it, between what you can control, where your focus should be, versus what you can't.
Yes.
Which is tremendously empowering, not just for addicts, but I think even more so for partners, right? They're right out the gate. When you look at steps 1, 2, and 3 in the 12-step program, it's all about, here are the things that you have a control or influence on, and here's all the crap that you don't, and what do you do with it?
Right.
Right. Instead of pouring that endless energy that we as addicts or we as partners, right, have poured into the relationship, or trying to shift or manage or change things that are immovable. 12-step comes in and says, hey, that energy, you pouring the energy isn't the problem. It's where you're pouring it.
Yeah.
Let's help you pour it better.
Well, and so we get into this place where, okay, so what are boundaries about? Well, boundaries are all about being built around your needs and your wants, right? What do you need and want individually and from this relationship? And so boundaries are always about me, about my health, my safety, my happiness, my right, living the kind of life that I want to live. But
Yeah.
even having just said that, now you see where things go awry, because what did she say in her submission? Oh, okay, Mark, I'm hearing you. So it's all about ignoring your partner's actions and just making it all about you, right? You can see how that happens.
Absolutely. Well, see, and this is where we're going to make the link, right? Because it's not about that, right? When we set healthy boundaries, it is placing a focus on our own boundaries first. But here's the reason why, and a lot of this has to do with the dysfunctional nature of codependency and other things that come into play that cause connection to be dysfunctional in relationships, right? When we're doing this recovery approach, we're not just breaking out of acting out for addicts, nor for partners are we just healing betrayal trauma. We're reworking the relationship. We're changing and fixing the kinks and the other things that contributed or stemmed from the initial issues and all of those things, right? It's a complete holistic process. So when you're looking at boundaries, if I am going to, when we look at how connection works, connection always happens, as we say, in Dare to Connect, from the top down. So if in other words, my ability to connect with myself, to connect with other people is directly correlated and dependent on how much I can connect with me. Connection is all about sharing and receiving. And if I am not connected with myself, meaning I don't know what makes me tick, what my hopes, my dreams, my frustrations, my anxieties, my fears, my whatever are, and I'm not able to A, be in touch with those, and B, share those with other people, I by definition am not going to be able to connect as well with other people as I might be otherwise. So it's all about that authentic self.
Well, and let's make sure that we clearly communicate what we mean when we say it's all about the authentic self. That does not mean that I ignore how my addict partner has hurt me, the pain that he or she has caused, right? Because she says it's just all about ignoring my partner's actions. No, no, because a very big part of this quote partner side of the street is getting in deep touch with what is the harm that's been done. How have I been hurt? How have I been wounded? What is the reality of my life now that I'm starting to see the facts and the truth come out about all these years or decades in this relationship? There is absolutely a critical space for all of that to be acknowledged, to be delved into, for the layers to be peeled back, for for the partner to have, quote, we call it their day in court, right? To express, to explore. All of that is part of this.
Yes, absolutely. I love the way the Mark is phrasing that, because you guys can hopefully see. In other words, in order to have connection with other people, right? The more we get in touch with our authentic selves and we honor our authentic selves, the more it opens the door for connection.
Yeah.
See, when you look at one of the, like, for example, let's just take one primary example of where disconnection happens in the relationship as a result of betrayal. As Mark said earlier, right? So many partners can connect with the idea of not having a voice in the marriage in one way, shape, or form, right? Either the addict is unwilling to hear, he's unable to hear, he's too reactive, he's completely out of touch. She sometimes has been under the gun of severe emotional abuse. It hasn't been safe for her to share for lots of reasons, right? All of those things do what? They constantly are pushing the relationship apart and building resentment. Because anytime a person's voice is silenced, resentment is always going to be the pushback.
Absolutely.
Right. And so you, as long as a partner it is not able, in other words, to express, to explore, and to share their authentic self, connection in the relationship is impossible. You'll never connect with another person if you don't feel like they have your interests at heart. Who would ever want to be in a marriage like that? Nobody. Right. And so these actually run in tandem. In other words, connecting with the self and establishing healthy boundaries to provide self-care, to look after one's own needs first. I know it sounds bass backwards, but it is actually the way to open the door to connect with the partner, with the addict partner. Right.
Well, because what naturally happens, and unfortunately, nearly all of us were raised this way, where you really didn't have individual, sovereign needs and wants. You were kind of, almost all of us, enmeshed in some kind of a system, a dysfunctional family system, a system with peers, an educational system, a church system, right? You were never just an individual. And so we didn't learn how to, quote, take care of ourselves from an authentic, what are my authentic needs? What are my wants? And how do I go about establishing boundaries and a way of living that those are met? We rarely ever see anybody come out of a truly healthy system into adulthood with all of that intact. So this is why it's so important to pay attention right to my side of the street first, so I can get in touch with all of that. Who am I? What's my vision for the future, right? What truly are my authentic needs, wants, dreams, aspirations? Once I can determine all of that, apart from and separate from a partner or anyone else, then once I have all that established, now I can say, okay, knowing all that about me, now I can reach out and see if collaboration is possible with this other person.
Yes.
Is it conducive? Is there a sense of unity in me pursuing my authentic vision and path, in him or her pursuing theirs? And can we find a place of where that crosses over and we collaborate? But I can't get to that collaboration place unless I know where I stand. And that's the individual work of 12-step, to try to get you out of that enmeshed, unhealthy part of you're nobody unless you're part of this whole thing over here, to I am me. I'm a sovereign, valuable, right, worthy individual who can have wants and needs and dreams and a vision, and I can go forward. Now, who can I collaborate with?
Yes. Absolutely. Well, and that leads into the next statement that she put in here that we wanted to address. She says in her submission, it's all about disconnection then, right?
Right.
Right. And which again, if you look at it on the surface, we could see that. What it really is we were kind of summing what we're saying here is it's about establishing and holding boundaries around the needs of the self first, right? Learning how to fill your own bucket in healthy ways.
Yep.
Now, sometimes, depending on how early one is in recovery and how deep the codependency trends run in the relationship or the trauma or other factors, maintaining a long-term healthy connection sometimes does mean short-term disconnection.
Yeah, I like those words. Yeah.
Right. When we establish those initial boundaries, so for example, if a partner is establishing initial boundaries around safety, those boundaries may be on the surface disconnecting for us. And I guarantee you, speaking from personal experience as the addict, it sure as shit does feel disconnecting. Brittany coming to me and saying, hey, if you're not doing these things, I don't feel safe to be sexual with you. How does that feel as an addict? Oh, so you're not going to have sex with me unless I do X, Y, or Z. Right. That's not her again, trying to change me. That's her saying what? In order for me to be intimate and safe with somebody to where physical intimacy can be authentic for me, I need to have X, Y, and Z needs met from anybody. I would like it to be you, Steve, right? But this isn't about changing you. This is about me honoring what I need.
Right.
Right. It's about that.
I remember when my wife started to do her own really healthy individual work, it was unnerving for me, because I was accustomed to us being really enmeshed and intertwined with each other, where we really didn't have, quote, independent, sovereign, separate personalities or identities, right? It was just sort of this conglomerate. And when she started to find her voice and seek her healthy pathways and do her work, I panicked. Like, what is she doing? Where's she going? She's leaving me in the dust. She's right. Did she still love me? Are we getting a divorce? That was just from her finding her voice and doing her healthy work. And for a time, she really had to have some pretty firm boundaries to not let me run and kind of plug into her to try to get this joint identity thing going again. She had to separate herself for a time. And then that caused me to make the choice whether to do my individual work, so that we could then go do what? We could go from those unhealthy dependencies that we had, separate and do our own work on our own sides of the fence. And then this wonderful process of two increasingly healthy individuals coming back together to be interdependent and collaborative.
Yes.
But we couldn't get there unless we separated first to do our individual work. We couldn't.
Well, and in some ways it's to meet needs. In some ways it's for safety. Right. There's a huge safety factor as well. Again, if and again, hopefully you guys are seeing the connection here, right? If Brittany, so for example, I'll just use myself as an example because this was a real thing in our marriage. There was a long time where Brittany compromised her own boundaries in an effort to try to connect with me when I was in my nonsense. Okay. So I would cross communication boundaries. I would become emotionally abusive. I was dismissive of different things. And even though authentically for her authentic self was saying, what? This isn't okay. Way being treated isn't okay. What would she do? Out of a place of love and trying to preserve the relationship, she would overextend herself. She would compromise her own boundaries, which in turn developed what? Resentment and animosity, both for herself as well as for me. So, in other words, as she started to get healthy and do her own work, even though at the beginning it was terrifying because she's pulling back on the surface, what is she really doing? She's honoring herself first so that she's not betraying herself or being betrayed by me or not being pressured by me to do the same the way she used to be,
Yeah.
which is then what allows her to actually show up in the relationship. Right.
Yep.
Again, I know that sounds convoluted.
It does. It's hard to get your arms around it sometimes.
But that's exactly what it means, right? And so sometimes in the short term, I'll give you another example. Sometimes in a couple, you all of you hear us talk about taking a break, right? When communication boundaries are broken on this program all the time. If you looked at that just on the surface, what does that look like? Oh, you said something mean to me, so I'm punishing you, so I'm not going to talk to you anymore. It's not a punishment. And it's not an attack. It's not any of those things. It's the most loving act that you can take because when a person takes a break in a healthy way, what are they saying? We have done this dance 25 times before. And if I play this conversation forward, you and I are no longer dialoguing. We're just throwing bombs at each other. And someone's going to get their leg blown off if we continue.
Right.
So in that situation, what are we doing? We're not trying to punish the other person or stick it to them. Well, I'm not talking to you anymore. What were we doing? We're trying to preserve what's left of the relationship from further unnecessary damage so that we can try to work on it when we're in a space to do it.
Well, and this is, we're into deep boundaries work this month and Dare to Connect. Yeah. This is where this advanced boundaries work comes in that says what? We're having a dialogue right now. It's quickly spinning into a dark place. And as I'm observing what's happening here with us going back into old habits, this no longer feels authentic to me. It's not genuine to where I'm headed as an individual or where I would like us to head. So because it's not authentic or healthy, I am going to now hold a boundary that I have, and I'm going to say, we need to take a break.
Yep.
And in doing so, I get to go to my side and do my personal work. You get to go do yours and reach out to all of our resources and our outside support system. And then can we come back and try this again? Can two authentic individuals show up to now collaborate with each other?
Absolutely.
If it starts to fall apart again, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to enforce my boundary on my side because it doesn't feel healthy or authentic or real to me. And therefore I must separate, go and do what's needed and come back. Do you see that?
And that's the pattern, guys.
And
sometimes at the beginning, that means a lot of breaks.
I know it does, a lot of breaks. All we're doing is taking breaks.
It's like a discussion about what's for dinner turns into UN peace talks, but that's sometimes what it takes, and especially at the beginning. Now, what is this all leading towards? Mark already mentioned the term interdependency. We've talked about that on another podcast because we got to wrap this up. If I was just to throw myself in the mix, my wife and I know Mark and his wife are doing the same thing, and this is what we try to teach people in our program and Dare to Connect. And hopefully you're picking up some of it here in PBSE. My wife and I, we have the best marriage that we have ever had. But the reason why we have the best marriage that we've ever had is because we don't need each other the way that we used to. After going through the process of what we were describing here, at least the beginning parts, and then the advanced work and all the time and the energy and the money and everything else we put into it, we've gotten to a point where each of us, for the most part, we each work to stand emotionally on our own 2 feet. And then we support each other where we authentically can without taking ownership of the other person's stuff.
Yeah.
Right. That's how a relationship is supposed to function. It's two individual people who come together in all the right ways, but maintain their autonomy in all the right ways as well. And then we support each other. We help each other to grow in the relationship, but also as individuals. Right. And we know, as we say on this program all the time, that flies in the face of every rom-com you've ever watched, which there you go. Question asked, question answered. Why is this such a problem in our society? Right.
Yeah. And I
But
mean, and for me, the reason this individual work, owning my side of the street, and why 12 step was so valuable and is so valuable for me is it taught me to be to be able to account for whatever's going on in my life on my side of the street, to be response able, right? So that what happened to me before, I wasn't doing any of my individual work. So what was I? I was a bucket with all kinds of holes in it. And where would I go to get my bucket filled? I would go to my partner, and she'd fill my bucket because she's loving and she's amazing and kind. And then I would go away and it would all drain out of the holes, and I'd come back here to fill the bucket again.
Mm.
What I finally realized through 12 step was, Mark, you need to take your bucket and you need to find out where these holes are. You need to face them. You need to take accountability and responsibility for them, to get them patched, to get them healed, to get them solid, so that you can show up with your wife, not from a needy place, but from a, how can I contribute and collaborate, because I'm showing up as a bucket without holes, that's solid, that has its own reservoir of strength and emotional stability, et cetera, et cetera. And now two full healed or healing buckets can show up to combine, and look at how powerful that is based versus what we used to do.
Yeah.
That's really healthy, holistic 12 step combined with all the boundaries and the things that we teach in D2C. And you bring those two worlds together and it's just unbeatable.
Yeah. Amazing things happen.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we know we've just skimmed the surface on this. If you like where this has been going, if you like the podcast, you will love Dare to Connect. We hope that you'll consider coming to join us for the weekly groups, for the weekend support groups, for the new D2C Academy and the advanced courses that we have. This week we're releasing week 13 of a at least 19-week course on formal disclosure for people who have advanced standing in the program. There's so many features that we continue to add to it. If you'd like to come check it out, you're welcome to. We would encourage you to do that and grab a 2-week trial at daretoconnectnow.com. We'd love to see you there. If you would like to send in questions for the podcast, admittedly, we do have 2 to 3 month backlog right now, but we're working through them the best that we can. You can submit questions there at pbscpodcast.com. There's also a blog feature there where Mark is kind enough to maintain the topics of each podcast. He kind of organizes them in a search function there where you can do a search on the now 200 and, like we said at the beginning, 232. It sounds so cool, rolling off the tongue. 232 podcast episodes that we have on a variety of recovery topics and growing. So with that, we hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and we will catch you next week on the podcast.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Everything expressed on the PBSE podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.